This week's podcast is proudly sponsored by the Marantz SR7015 AV amplifier. Immerse yourself in stunning 3D surround sound with the most complete format support, including Auro 3D and IMAX Enhanced. The SR7015 easily handles demanding scenes in action films, as well as offering exceptional musical audio playback. Stream music from leading services and enjoy it throughout your whole home with HEOS built in. Discover more at marantz.com.
Hello and welcome to the AV Forums podcast, streaming live on Wednesday, the 9th of December. And joining me tonight is Steve Withers.
We're going to need some more FBI guys.
Ed Selley.
What idiot put you in charge?
And Kaz Harlow.
She's Dumbfenster.
Welcome back to the podcast. Only one more podcast until the Christmas break.
Yay!
Yes. It's been a long year. It's been like 2 or 3 years in one. It's outstayed its welcome and it needs to bugger off. That's all we can say. So yes, we've got one final podcast next week. We're going to try and get some of the rest of the team on next week as well. Hopefully Tom can make it, and we'll reach out to Mark as well and see if Mark can make it along, and we'll bring our party poppers and our games, and we'll have a bit of a Christmas special. So we're going to be discussing best Christmas movies. Obviously, that's Die Hard, but we can discuss other Christmas movies as well, and our favourites and all sorts of things. So come along for that next week, and bring your suggestions as well. Well, what are your favourite Christmas movies, or what would you recommend to watch over the holidays? Because let's face it, I ain't going to Scotland this year, so I'm going to be spending a lot of time with the projector in the cinema. Yeah, so yes, we're going to have a lot of time to watch lots of films this year. So if you're watching us, thank you very much. If you're watching live on YouTube, please hit the like button if you can. And if you're not subscribed to the channel, then please subscribe to the channel as well. And of course, hit the notification bell, because what does that do, Steve?
Well, it gives you notifications as to when and where we've got new content.
Excellent.
Also, annoyingly, it tells you about 10 times before the podcast starts that it's coming in like 30 minutes, 15 minutes, 5 minutes.
Oh, so that's what you watch before you turn up 3.5 minutes before we go live.
Yeah, well, that's 3.5 minutes longer than I really needed.
One of these days you are going to fail spectacularly. It's just going to go live with you floundering around, having swallowed one of your AirPods. And
of course, if you appreciate what we do here, I'm sure one or two of you might do that. Then, of course, you can support us. You can support the editorial content, the videos and the podcasts and so on. You can do that one or two ways. You can join us on a regular basis for £3 a month and become a patron on Patreon. So that's patreon.com/AV Forums. And new patrons, I'm going to get this wrong. Apologies for getting this wrong, but new patrons, Per Fez Fredrickson. Hopefully I said that correct. Thank you very much for joining us as a patron. Also, Matt Burton. Welcome along, Matt. Thank you very much. Rick Buchanan, again, another new patron. Thank you very much, Rick. And Lawrence Dalton. Thank you very much, Lawrence. Already a patron, and he's doubled his monthly donation. So thank you very much for that. It really is appreciated for doing that. If Patreon doesn't quite work for you, then you can make one-off donations of any amount you like, and you can also attach a question to that, and of course it'll pop up on the screen, and when we see it, we can answer your question for you. That's streamlabs.com/AV Forums, streamlabs.com/AV Forums for that. Like I say, any donation you like there, any amount. And obviously, if you do support us, you help us grow AV Forums, improve the site speed and features. We can do more editorial, we can do news and videos and reviews and podcasts. And just a quick shout out, there will be more than just a weekly podcast when we come back in January. Maybe we'll have more about that next week, maybe not.
it depends if it's like Brexit behind the scenes. It depends whether we've hammered out the negotiations with all the parties involved.
It does. So I'll put it out there and just see what's what. Right. So what have we done this week? Not a lot. Other than work, for me, I'll go first because it's going to be nice and swift. Still got the Sony here. We're going to talk about the Sony tonight, and Steve's going to talk about the laser one that he's had. It's got freaking lasers on it. So we're going to talk about that a bit later on under the hardware. What else have I been doing this week? Oh, Ed, I think I'm going to go yellow.
Oh, contentious. All right, fine. Fair. Look, it's your money, and you got to live with it. And I understand the arguments behind yellow. I just think the orange is a nicer colour. But
paint it up like the main Force Interceptor. That's the main thing.
yeah, big. If you go yellow, yes. Can you obviously just don't do it as an actual spray job, but get a wrap, just a wrap stripe for it, and an MFP logo. I'd contribute.
Dress in leathers and walk around with a sawn-off shotgun just to really finish off the effect. Do a Chris McAneny and dress up.
I think I have to draw the line somewhere. I ain't dressing up, that's for sure.
Oh, well, I'm glad that we're not ruling the wrap out. That's a good
Yeah.
Well, if you pay for it, Ed, I'll certainly drive around in it. Don't get any problems with that. So we're talking about, obviously, the Mark 1, and we will come on to Chuck Yeager in a second, who sadly passed away this week. The first man to break the sound barrier.
97?
He was. Great innings. He's had a fantastic life. I'm sure a few of us would love to have lived the life that he's lived. Got played by
Sam Shepard in The Right Stuff. Is that a man? You're goddamn right, that's a man.
So yeah, it was sad to hear about his passing. But again, the first man to break the sound barrier, and that's why Ford called the Mustang the Mark 1, break the sound barrier. So the colour choices, I was going to go orange. The reason I'm going yellow is basically because it's a historic colour. It's a historic brand. It came around in 69, 70 was the first time it turned up. And Grabber Yellow was a colour back then, and Grabber Yellow is a Mark 1 only colour for the Mark 1 that I am going to get next year. So that's the reason I've gone yellow. And I know Ed wasn't particularly.
No. Look, it's your money and your car. I just, as I say, and you know, the argument about it being specific. Although that said, I will say, Phil, that I haven't found my life inundated with orange Mustangs up until this point. But nevertheless, the arguments are valid. It's not what it mainly comes down to is that I don't think it's Ford's best yellow, and this is far too sad a conversation for us to have on a live podcast.
All I can see is the yellow in the Mad Max photo in your background,
and that's a richer, altogether spunkier yellow.
I really, I mean, it really looked good on the 4K. The yellow of that car. If it's anything like that yellow,
I think you should go for British Telecom yellow.
That's a real bird.
The old Busby vans, but
nice.
Yeah, you don't get that choice, but yeah, it's like a pastel highlighter yellow.
Yeah,
but with the black accents and stripes and stuff, I think it's going to pop. I think it'll be, and it's going to be rare. It's going to be really rare, which is kind of what I want. I want a little bit of exclusivity. So there you go. So that's what I've been doing. Basically, sitting looking at pictures of annoying Ed and reviewing a projector. So Steve, what have you been doing?
Well, I got the vaccine because I'm so old. And, no, I'm kidding. I haven't been doing much either, really, other than trying to work out how to get HBO Max in this country.
Tough, isn't it?
Which we will talk about. Yeah, you can do it.
Yes.
You can do it. It's a
Did
bit
you do it?
convoluted. I haven't yet. I was debating it because I'm thinking, actually, well, we'll talk about this a bit later. But
yeah, I've been trying as well. Yeah,
certainly. I might do it. I'm tempted because it's not a ton of money, and you know.
No, but the question is whether they curb.
Well, at least you're paying for it, Steve.
Well, yeah, I mean, I will be paying for it. It's just obviously at the moment you need to have a US VPN and a US credit card. That's the tricky bit.
Right. Well, you see, I've got relatives in Canada, so I'm not sure what if I could.
That's not the US, though, is it?
Well, it's North America, Steve. So they're more likely
I think
to
HBO Max is available in Canada as well. Actually.
So if that's available, then that's a route I could take.
Oh well, you can do that for me then, can't you?
If you ask nicely. Cross my palm with silver. I'm sure we could sort something out.
There we go. Admitting to bribery on air. Good look.
Absolutely. So yeah, not a lot else. Did you get your flu jab, Steve? Talking about vaccines and
Didn't
stuff.
bother actually.
Did you not?
You're holding out for the big one.
Yeah. I've never had a flu jab. And answering, who was it? Gary Hall. I haven't got a cold. It's just bloody freezing in my house, and that's why my nose was running.
Yeah, bar humbug.
It's on full blast, but it's not really making any difference, frankly.
Well, you find that in old houses. This one, it takes hours to get up to temperature, and then you've got to keep topping it up because if you let it go too long, it's just
I've got the worst of all worlds. I've got walls that are like this thick.
Yeah, same.
Right, so I can't get a Wi-Fi signal around the house, but it's freezing. So yeah,
marvelous.
Yeah. So Ed,
I have been doing some work for you and some other people I have been agonizing over whether to spend an inordinate amount of money on a film poster.
Mad Max film poster.
A Mad Max film poster, yeah.
How much, Ed?
$250, which I need to make this clear in the context of Mad Max.
Is it signed by George Miller?
No, trust me, Steve, it's one of the cheapest ones out there.
Is it an original?
It's an original 79.
Theatrical Aussie release, US release?
Japanese.
Oh.
Which I have to say, it's a piece of art I've never seen before, and I think it looks the absolute dog's danglies. But it's still quite a lot of money for a piece of folded paper. So I'm umming and ahhing over that at the moment. In context, I'm going to. I'm 40 imminently, and people are going, "You must buy something," and it's like. I figure that just saying, "Oh yeah, I bought more records," is only it's going to antagonize people. So I thought, if I'm going to buy something, it has to be significant. It can't wear out and all the rest of it. So we'll see how things go. But yeah, most likely I'll probably end up doing something stupid.
I got a Scarlett Johansson.
That's good for you.
40th
Signed photograph.
Oh no, this isn't signed. I mean, to be fair, it would be quite nice to have, Professor Mel Gibson, sign it to Sugar Tits, happy 40th. But
I imagine these days he probably would if you're.
I'm sure he would. But as Cass points out, it's not actually Mel in the pictures, so it would probably be a bit weird. But no, that's been the major point of contention. Otherwise, I've just been cooking, trying to get. Christmas presents and other things. I've just, I'm not using a major online retailer this year and trying to support local ones, and it's an incredibly mixed bag. Sometimes the experience is so much better than Amazon, you think, why on earth was I using that? And then other times, let's be honest, it's not. So it's been an interesting one. But no, that's me up until this point. So yeah, there you go.
Okay, Kaz?
Yeah, it's pretty much the same. It's lots and lots of work, and Christmas is coming, and everyone wants to figure out a way that they can, make the rules work for them. And it always gets controversial with families. No, we don't want to do this. We want to. No, we're not going to see you. We're going to see. I mean, it's
when you find out whether you're popular or not.
The rules are there for a reason, and it's a real pain because people take it really personally. If you go, well, we can't do this. I mean, we have done some. We've done some good work at getting everyone on board. My brother-in-law, he's come back from London and he's going to isolate for 2 weeks before we see him. So that's something. That's
remember to feed him before.
He's just locked in a box, but he's got Wi-Fi. But yeah, I think things like that. It just gets all so.
Yeah, I mean, I had parents saying, "Well, at least you could just pop up for the day," and it's like, no, I'm not coming up. You'll thank me for it in the long run. Yeah. We can wait 6 weeks or however long till we're all vaccinated and so on, and then we can have Christmas a bit later on. I mean, I'm used to working over the Christmas period because in my last employment I worked because I was single and other people who I worked with on shift had kids. I always used to just volunteer for Christmas and New Year anyway, so I always worked it. So I'm kind of used to being on my own, so it wouldn't bother me being on my own for Christmas. Although I'll have to sort out Christmas grub because I was going to get it from the pub across the road, and they're now not allowed to open. So
yeah, that's not ideal. I say I'm gonna house my brother over the actual Christmas period itself, which means I will be doing some cooking. But actually, do you know what? I'm relieved. It's with only 2 people, there is no creditable reason to go anywhere near a turkey, so we are not having a turkey on Christmas Day. So that's good. Quite happy with that. But
at the end of the day, it's just another day, really, isn't it? So I mean, you can manage to plod through. So, and like I say, once we've all vaccinated, we can all get together and do what we need to do with families and stuff. So, competition time. You're locked away. Here's your opportunity to win some stuff to watch while you're locked away. Kaz.
Sure. Well, we've got another bumper set of 20 competitions.
Good God.
New 4K competitions for the HMV Japanese Steelbook of Spartacus, Lionsgate's Requiem for a Dream, Arrow's Cinema Paradiso. We've still got open competitions for Arrow's King of New York 4K, Evil Dead 4K, Westworld Season 3 in 4K. We also got a bunch of new Blu-ray competitions for HBO's Perry Mason, Director's Cut of Godfather Part 3, and the Criterion December Blu-ray titles. Of course, you've still got the chance to win a Denon Home 250 with AV Online and a Sharp HT SBW800 Dolby Atmos soundbar too. So head over to avforums.com/competitions to enter. All competitions open to eligible AV Forums members resident in the UK.
Anything else?
There were a lot more competitions than when I was doing it.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think
because Kaz works, Steve. He's a worker.
Fair enough.
I think maybe the PR companies they obviously
I did all the hard work, the groundwork.
Yes, and you just gave me the contacts. And
basically, you're the Donald Trump to my Obama. I've done all the hard work, and you're reaping all the benefits.
Whatever.
Maybe it's that.
Economically, I should stress.
It's taken a while, but it's good that we've got a good run going, and we've got a bunch of Patreon exclusives. Patrons have a host of excellent prizes, including the 45k. That's a lot of money. £45 Akira limited edition 4K box set, the limited edition HMV exclusive Japanese artwork steelbook 4K release of The Great Wall, BBC's Roadkill limited series on Blu-ray, and Better Call Saul season 5 on Blu-ray. And
we discussed this last week, Kaz, but that's pretty good for £3 a month.
It is, yeah.
Your odds of winning are pretty strong on those.
I mean, from what I can tell, the average number of entrants on the Patreon competitions is about 6. So there's some good prizes to win there. If you want to spend that £3 a month, I mean, that's pretty good. I'm looking at a VPN right now. There's a podcast exclusive, which is to win a copy of Train to Busan Presents Peninsula on Blu-ray. Stay tuned for details on how to win that. And we've got a bunch of prize winners, finally. Lady Grey quite appropriately won the copy of the Royal 3 DVD collection, which is a podcast exclusive.
Which had varying degrees of royalty, as I recall.
It did, yeah, only 2/3. Yes. Ducky63 won the Last Christmas DVD and CD. ISIS 1981 UK won a copy of May Gray Seasons 1 and 2 on DVD. Mr. H won the Patreon exclusive Ghostbusters 1 and 2 in 4K. And The Thing WNN won the Patreon exclusive Back to the Future 4K limited edition Steelbook. So, yeah, it's pretty good.
Glad you said Mr. H, because I always think it's Well,
I was gonna.
You know, Steve, I do that in my head as well. That's how I say it to myself.
I was gonna try and make a sound, but I just went with Mr. H instead. Hopefully, I haven't pronounced it wrong.
Well done at the competition winners. Get entering, and if you're a patron, they're fantastic odds for some really good prizes. So yeah, cracking stuff. We'll be back in a sec with hardware. Right, so let's get into some hardware. Let's talk about some projectors. So Steve has had the VW790ES from Sony. I've had the VW590ES again from Sony. We've had the projectors at the same time. You might remember we interviewed Chris Mullins 2 weeks ago on the podcast, or maybe it was 3 weeks ago now, on the podcast about these new machines. So we've had a chance now to basically do our testing, test them out, watch a few films and so on, and then compare notes, which we did yesterday, wasn't it, Steve? Compared our notes. So, yeah, I think I'll start first because it's the entry level. Well, it's not actually, it's the mid-range, isn't it? Because the 270 is staying around.
270, yeah.
So the 270 is the round about the £5,000 mark. And then you jump up to the 590, which is what I've been looking at, which is in competition really with the JVC N5. It's that level of the market. It's a bulb projector. And then you jump up to the 790, which Steve's been looking at, which is laser light. It's got freaking lasers on it. So we're going to talk about that a bit later on. So bulb, like I say, for the 590, there's not a great deal of difference between this and the outgoing model that it replaces. In fact, a lot of the measurements...
There are any physical differences?
No, there's no physical differences. And even in performance terms, when I measured it, this 590 was actually less accurate out of the box than the previous model.
Funnily enough, that also applied to the 790 in terms, not so much the SDR performance was incredibly accurate out of the box. Actually, I was really impressed. But the HDR performance isn't quite as accurate as the one the 760 you tested.
Yeah. So, well, the 590 SDR was a bit over the place. I mean, it wasn't hugely out. It was just noticeable. It was over the visible threshold. So, if you have a keen eye, you probably would see some of the errors that was in there. Although it was easy enough to calibrate. Gamma is an issue with. They don't have a gamma editor, the same as JVC. I wish they would get their act together, both of these, because they used to have gamma editors built into the projectors, JVC and Sony. I don't know why they removed them from the actual projector. It may have been a memory thing, and just thinking, well, if we do it separate software, then calibrators can use the separate software. It's just annoying because it means you've got to look out. Certainly with the Sonys, and I didn't bother because it's just too much of a faff on, to be honest.
You didn't need to, actually. Mine measured, the 790 measured 2.4 pretty much.
Right, but it didn't out of the box. I managed to get it once I calibrated it, and I managed to get it tracking close to 2.4 once that was the case. But it took a bit of faffing around to get it to track properly. But once it was calibrated, extremely accurate. There's a lot of features on the projectors, which it's the same for both projectors. So we'll probably go through all the features and discuss both of the models. But certainly in terms of image quality, it's a native 4K projector, which means it's 49. Is it 4096?
Yeah, it's 496.
Yeah.
21.
So 2160. So it is 17:9 actually, not 16:9. So you do have the zoom feature where it'll add some scaling, but it'll actually move the image out to the edge of the panel. I tend not to do that because I don't want any scaling added onto the image. So what I do is I set it up on my screen so it's unzoomed, but using the native panel. So you're not scaling the image in any way. Image-wise, SDR for the 590, it was the same as the outgoing model. I didn't see anything that was particularly wrong with it. It was a nice cinematic-looking image. It's definitely sharp. The problem is, even with even when you switch off the reality creation, which does add quite a bit of sharpening, you can adjust it on a number of parameters, but to my eye, it still overly sharpens the image, and I'd much rather not use it. So I tend to switch reality creation off. I know a lot of people, if you watch a lot of video content like sports and so on, I know a lot of people like that, or nature programs, people like that sort of sharp-ish image. It's just a little bit too sharp for me. I tend to switch it off. But even switched off, there is still processing going on. It's a very processed image on the Sony. And it differs from the JVC. The JVC is a tad softer if you look at both of them side by side.
Yeah.
But I much prefer the softer look because it doesn't look overly processed.
But it's more film-like.
Film-like, exactly, yeah. So in terms of accuracy and so on, once it's calibrated, the 590 looked very, very nice on a 10-foot scope screen that I have here, and you can blank it out. We'll come to the motorized stuff in a minute because it is infuriating on the Sonys, and hopefully they can fix it, because when you use the automatic zoom between 235 and 16:9 and so on, it never hits the same spot twice.
I'd go as far as say if you use a scope ratio screen like Phil and I do, don't buy them, because it will drive you nuts every time you change aspect ratio.
It is annoying because it's mainly the shift. The shift never lands where it should, and you've got to hit the shift a couple of times.
Whereas, in all fairness, the JVCs, it's
perfect,
spot on, perfect every time.
Yeah. So HDR, you're not going to get much out of a projector in terms of HDR. Certainly not the same performance that you would get from a direct view display like a TV, like an OLED or like an LCD. So if you go into a projector thinking you're going to see an image like that, you are certainly not going to do that. Peak brightness on the 590 was just over 200 nits when it was receiving an HDR signal. There is obviously there's various things that you can switch on and off that helps with that, and we're going to come on to those because you have the iris control, which opens and closes iris. You can do it on a limited or on a full basis, or switch it off completely. What I found was I got more peak brightness performance when it was switched off. when I switched the iris control on, you lost about 40 nits straight away from the top end, so from the brightest end. So it went from 203 nits down to 170 nits. But obviously, contrast-wise, that was a little bit improved because obviously you're improving the contrast slightly there. The other thing is, and this is the bit we're going to come on to, so maybe you can do a little bit on the 790.
Do a little bit of pros and cons on the 790. So on the pros side, out-of-the-box accuracy was fantastic. The errors for SDR were all below 3, the visible threshold. So that was impressive. The image is incredibly sharp and detailed, but like you said, Phil, to my eye, it feels, even with the reality creation off, it feels slightly processed. It gives it a slightly digital look and less film-like when compared to the JVC N7. But the SDR performance I thought was genuinely impressive. And we'll talk about the HDR in a second. One of the things that immediately struck me when I got it, I've got to say that obviously this is exactly the same as far as I'm aware, physically in terms of its, the guts of the projector. It's exactly the same as the 760, but it's $4,000 less, right? The 760 was 16 grand originally, I think. Is that right?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, and now it's 11,999. So that's obviously a plus point. But when I got it out of the box, I did think that the build quality isn't as good as JVC's. For a £12,000 projector, it doesn't feel slightly as well made. Plus, and this is the bit that really, I thought it was broken when I first got it out of the box, because around the lens, there's a very large gap. And I thought, bloody hell, something's fallen off. Yeah, because if you look at the one you've got, there is that kind of, that sort of, those lines that fan out around the lens. That's where, which is actually an air intake vent, right?
Yeah.
This is just a gap. And I was thinking, like, I was looking in the box, thinking what's fallen off the projector. And then I looked at your review. I looked online at the photographs of it on the website, and I realized that's what it's supposed to look like. I got to say, it looks really shoddy. You can see inside the chassis. I'm really surprised at that from someone like Sony, who are always really good at design. Yeah. For me, it was a weird thing.
Yeah, but I mean, obviously it's a laser projector, so it needs a lot of cooling. And the reason that they've done that, although it looks strange, is that it gets more airflow through the projector with the least amount of noise, because you're not forcing air through, like you say, a filter at the front or whatever. So you're not adding too much extra noise, because laser really needs, like LED as well, and really needs some good cooling behind it. That's why it's there. It looks strange when you first see it, but to be honest with you, I got quite used to it when I saw it initially on the 760. And
once I realized there wasn't something missing, I was a bit more relaxed. I thought, okay, that's just the way it looks. But initially, I was like, what the hell? Obviously, the big thing about 790 is it's a laser projector, so you've got very fast 20 seconds from pressing the on button to getting to the screen, and almost instant off. Longer lifespan, 20,000 hours plus, obviously more consistent, doesn't dim. So whilst it's only 2,000 lumens compared to, say, the JVC, which is the N7's 2,900, I think, top of my head, it's not going to dim like a bulb will. So you'll have more consistency. So overall, if you're asking me what's the difference between this and the 760, I didn't review the 760, you did, Phil, but based upon reading your review, it's almost identical in terms of performance, with the except what the bits we're about to talk about in a second. But in general, in terms of SDR and overall, it's pretty much the same. But it's $4,000 less, so that's a big plus point. And aside from the lens memory, which was driving me nuts like you, so far so good.
Yeah, both of these are strong projectors. So if it sounds like we're being overly negative, we don't mean it that way. It's just they are so good that when you see little bits and pieces, and again, we're comparing them to JVC models we've spent a long time living with. I've lived with the N5 since the beginning of the year. Steve, this is your second N7, is that right?
Yes, I had to swap it out because it developed a fault.
Yeah, so you live with the N7 all the time.
I've had the N7 for nearly 2 years now.
Yeah. So we spent a lot of time with these other projectors. So I think it gives us a good grounding to assess these. And it's the reason why I took the 590 and Steve took the 790s, because I've got the N5, Steve's got the N7. So it gave us a good comparison point to compare the machines. I did see there was somebody, it might have been Dan Howdell in the comments,
was
15
mentioning grand was for the previous version. So,
and I also saw he was mentioning a Lumagen. Obviously, we don't test them with off-board processors, but if you use an off-board processor like a Lumagen, then obviously you can do a lot of things that are missing on the projectors, or can do things that
be quite a good thing to pair it with. I wouldn't recommend getting a Lumagen with, say, an N7 or an N5, but maybe with the Sony projector, particularly with the £12,000 790, it would be a nice addition.
Yeah. So, and the reason for that is...
Sorry, one thing. I don't know if you tested it, but 36 milliseconds of input lag if you're a gamer.
Right. I hadn't gotten around to testing that. I'm still got...
In 2020, is that good or bad?
That's for a projector. That's really good.
Projector. That's pretty good.
Fine. Yeah. I haven't got around to testing the 590 yet, but it's still on the test bench as we speak. So I'm going to be doing contrast measurements tonight. So I'll quickly run through that as well. So let's move on to HDR, because the good thing about the JVCs that we've been living with is that they do dynamic tone mapping, frame by frame, and they had a firmware update back in November, which added a new theater optimizer onto that as well. So the theater optimizer, you punch in your screen size, you punch in your screen material, so the gain of your screen material, which then helps the tone mapping even more in terms of the decisions that it makes in terms of how it's going to display the image. So the great hope here with the Sony was that it was also going to have dynamic tone mapping, and unfortunately it doesn't.
It has HDR enhancer.
Yeah, so we're going to come on to that. So it doesn't have the same system as JVC has, which is the actual tone mapping and the dynamic tone mapping changing scene by scene. What Sony's doing is it's a more mechanical approach to that. And it's what they call, Steve?
HDR enhancer. Yeah. They advertise it as HDR enhancer, and I think they're being a little bit disingenuous in terms of the marketing, because it's giving the impression it's dynamic tone mapping, but you never see the words dynamic tone mapping ever mentioned in the marketing, the press release, or the manual, or the website. So that rang bells, and I thought that's a bit strange. And then when I got around to testing it, I realized that it wasn't doing dynamic tone mapping in the way the JVCs are. It's a more mechanical approach to it, as you just said, Phil. Go on, sorry.
Yeah, so basically on the 590, like I say, it wasn't particularly bright. And if I remember right, with the 760ES, it wasn't particularly bright for...
Well, no, it's either. Not. I mean, obviously, starting off, it's only 2,000 lumens anyway, which is not that bright for an HDR projector these days. Yeah. So starting from a relatively, I say relatively, it's still pretty bright, but relatively dim compared to, say, the competition. But I did think, I don't know about you, but when I started watching some HDR content, I first thought, this is quite dim. I need to move up a lot of the controls, like the contrast control, the laser light brightness control, and the HDR enhancer to high to get an image that better represented what I'm used to seeing from the JVC.
Yeah. So and it was exactly the same for myself. So we did use the controls that were there, the contrast enhancer and so on, and taking measurements. If you set the projector, and this is my one annoyance with the Sonys, is that it doesn't have a one size fits all for HDR. So because it's not applying tone mapping dynamically, you have to choose what you want it to do, whether you want it to clip detail and have more brightness, or whether you want to try and preserve detail, and I'm talking about the highlights here, and then back off on the contrast. So you're bringing more detail back into the image. Obviously, if you take the contrast down too low, you lose a lot of the dynamic range of the image, because you're lowering the contrast, but you're seeing more peak highlight details in the highlights. So, and it's annoying because 4,000 or 10,000 or 1,000 net mastered material all looks different. And so what you find you're doing is you find you're messing around with the contrast control, mainly the contrast control, trying to find the perfect balance between dynamic range and clipping, and how much you're prepared for it to clip. If you set it to 100 on the contrast, it clips a lot, actually from about 80% stimulus. So that's about 80% brightness.
80 is kind of the cutoff point, or the default, actually, I think. From
it then completely clips. Absolutely clips everything above that. So anything in 80, 90, 100% brightness it still displays that. It's just there's no detail there. You lose all the detail in it.
Plus, also something that caught me out, it wasn't really my fault, but there's an auto setting. There's HDR10 and there's the HDR reference setting, which you mentioned, Phil, which is actually 1000 nits clipped and it's meant to mirror a 1000 nit monitor effectively.
Yeah.
Now, the auto setting, when I got the projector, and it wasn't brand new, it had come from somebody else. Whoever, I don't think this is default. I'm pretty sure the default setting is auto HDR10, but someone had set it to auto HDR10 reference. So, of course, I put on some, 4,000 nit and 10,000 nit test material, and it was clipped to death. I'm like going, what the hell's going on here? And then I switched it to HDR10 and selected HDR10. I thought, oh crap, I've got all my detail back in the highlights. But then it was an HDR10 even when I was in SDR. And I thought, what the hell's going on now? But then I realized there was another section to auto where I could select the default HDR setting.
It's not intuitive. It's not intuitive. But once it's set up properly, HDR looks pretty good, but it looks a little bit on the flat side because it doesn't have the same contrast and it doesn't have the same dynamic tone mapping that I'm used to seeing on the N5. So it's not a bad projector in any way. And HDR, once it's set up, it's just you have to spend a lot of time finding that sweet spot for your room, your screen, and the content that you watch most often in HDR. And sometimes you need to switch between the two or move the contrast control. In terms of the actual figures, in terms of EOTF, you can get it to track EOTF pretty well, but you've got to bump the contrast up for it to do that, but it will do it once you bump the contrast up. Color gamut is the same as the last year's model, which is quite reduced on the bulb-based model, the 590.
90% on the laser.
Yeah, well, it was 84, 86% UV and XY.
On yours.
Oh yeah, and if you look at the tracking, which obviously we'll put the chart up in the written review, so you can have a look at the saturation tracking for DCI within 2020, and you can see that green clips off quite early, doesn't go all the way out. Same with cyans, it's clipped out. Blue doesn't quite reach across. Red, which is normally okay, is a little bit over. In terms of actual placement,
does that mean the 590 is not using a color filter? There's
no color filter on the 590. So what it uses is their triluminous. So that's what they're using there, and it was identical. I looked back at my not last year, but the year before's results, and it was identical in terms of in color gamut. So yeah, colors not too wide, but I thought colors on the laser would be a bit more.
They weren't as wide as I was expecting. Obviously, coming off the back of something like the Samsung, which is a RGB laser, was delivering almost the whole of 2020. This isn't RGB laser, so it's not as wide. I mean, it was measured 89-90%, which is a bit less than I was expecting. I was expecting a bit closer to 100. But in terms of actual colors, did look really nice on it. Yeah. I thought that was one area where it was quite strong in terms of its HDR performance. Whilst it didn't have the pop of the N7 in terms of the contrast with HDR material, it definitely had some very nice, really nuanced and subtle and well defined.
I really like how Sony do the colors. It's a bit like how Panasonic on their TVs do color as well. So what I tend to find is with the JVC projectors, colors are accurate and so on, but they look a little bit neon, or they can look a little bit neon if you've got a primary color, mostly primary color up on screen at any point. Whereas the Sony, it's just a nicer, natural looking color. And the other thing you've got to remember with wide color gamut is that very few films actually go out very far in terms of wide color, unless the film has been designed to specifically take advantage of it. You tend to find that most color graders, the same as HDR peak highlights and so on, they tend to be a bit more conservative when they color grade. So actually, because the projectors don't get out there and some of the TVs don't get 100%, and it's not really a big issue because
actually, it's a good point. You've reminded me, I need to buy Inside Out on 4K disc, because I know that when they were making that film, the Pixar deliberately pushed the color gamut in certain scenes out as wide as they could.
Yeah.
So it might be quite a good test.
Yes. So yeah, just bear that in mind as well. I mean, when it comes to the width of the color gamut, sometimes it's not the end of the world if it doesn't reach 100%, because a lot of the time, a lot of the colors that are actually used in the material you're watching are well within that color gamut anyway, and not as wide out, so you don't really have to worry about that too much. So yeah, it's strong machines. They have their little niggles. Obviously, maybe it's a little bit unfair that we've been living with the JVCs and we've got so used to the picture quality and so on those that, you know, it's, I don't think we're being unfair in any way. I think it just makes the differences stand out a little bit more because we've got that comparison point, Steve. So
no, I think if you like a nice, sharp, detailed image and you want the benefits of laser, then the 790 is definitely worth considering. Yeah. Obviously, it is £3,500 more than the N7, but you are paying for things like the fact it's got a laser light source, and therefore you get the longer lifespan and the more consistency. So that's all plus points. I just think that sorry, excuse me. I just think that I think JVC is doing HDR really well at the moment. That's the reality of it. They are just knocking it out of the park. I mean, they're delivering performances. I know people that have compared the N7, for example, directly to using a thing like a MAD VR or a Lumagen outboard processor, you know, which have very, you know, these things cost almost as much or if not more than in the N7 itself, and they're delivering, JVC is delivering a dynamic tone mapping experience that's comparable to those off, you know, outboard processors. So you know, it's a high bar that JVC has set, and I think Sony's approach doesn't quite hit it for me. But in other areas, I think they're really strong projectors. So.
But then if you, like Dan said in the comments, if you have the budget and you can put one of these with an outboard processor like a Lumagen, then you bypass a lot of the issues that we've had basically. With
absolutely. And nice to see that Dan mentions he had a 760 for 3 years and now he's got 790 because his other one broke and they replaced it with 790. He says he can't tell the difference. So I guess that answered the question about whether it's a massive upgrade or not.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a shame that obviously the dynamic tone mapping is not there, because I think a lot of people had their hopes up that dynamic tone mapping was coming at the Sonys, and it's not quite what people were expecting. So that is a little bit disappointing. But you know, Sony know where this benchmark is now, and you know, they have the resources to hand. I mean, they have a huge professional side of the business that provides projectors for, you know, cinemas and so on. So they definitely have the clout to have a look at it and develop their own software version of dynamic tone mapping. So fingers crossed that that's something to look at going forward. But these are two really strong projectors. The reviews will be up in the next week or so, and certainly over the holidays. Like I say, I haven't quite finished testing the 590 just yet. I've got contrast stuff to do, and then I'm probably going to watch another couple of movies just to make my mind up on it. But yeah, you seem to be a little bit further ahead, Steve, with the 790, so that review will probably be up before mine then.
What's up to you, isn't it? Whether you put it up or not. You're the editor. It's your choice.
All right, yeah.
Palming off it for Christmas Day.
Okay, I'll do that on Christmas Day.
I don't know. I'm just kidding.
Right, moving on to another company that are doing incredibly well this year with their products. I had a look at the AV receiver from NAD earlier in the year, the T778. Absolutely blew me away. If I was going out and spending my own money on an AVR, I would probably go and buy the NAD. It impressed me that much. So Ed's been looking at the M33, which is the streaming amp.
Yes, it's an all-in-one. I mean, NAD's got some funny ideas about how they refer to these things, but it is directly comparable to the name unities and devices along those.
And it looks like it's got the same TFT color.
Exactly the same as the one in the 778. But if you've spent the money to engineer that, you want to get as much use as you possibly can out of it. Right, this is a really odd product, and allow me to try and explain that, because it's really, really, really good. But this is the bigger version of the M10, which is the AV Forum's Hi-Fi Product of the Year 2019. So it's just been superseded this year in terms of our product of the year. It's still very much in production. The problem that the M33 has is that the M10 is subjectively and objectively perfect. For £2,200, there is not another product which gets within a country mile of it. It's absolutely outstanding. Now, for the avoidance of all doubt, the M33 is better than the M10. But I went through the agonies of the damned trying to work out if it's £1,800 better than the M10, because that's quite a significant. It's quite a significant sum of money. I've reached the conclusion that I cannot, under any objective judgment, mark the product down. It has been awarded a highly recommended badge because everything it does is just as superlatively competent as the M10. And having spent some time testing it with a fairly wide variety of equipment, if you go into selecting equipment for it as where it will be the cheapest part of your system, which sounds ridiculous at £4,000, but nevertheless, the cheapest part of your system, then it really starts to show what it can do. The Kudos Titans, which more by luck than judgment, still live here at the moment. They are not an easy speaker to drive. They're now £8,500, including the stands. NAD just got stuck straight into it. Absolutely fantastic as a combination. The onboard phono stage, which the M10 doesn't have, is very, very good. Connecting a Riga Planar 10 directly to that, absolutely magnificent performance. And then when in that situation where you've got £4,500 turntable, £8,500 speaker, so on and so forth, then the M33 really starts to show what it can do. But that is a fairly niche sort of market. It's one of those products where as I say, I can't objectively fault it, but under almost any circumstance that you'd be looking for these products, the M10 is capable of doing almost all of it. I think the problem is, and I do sort of mention this in the review, I think NAD set out to absolutely kill the category with the M10 and make sure it was better in every way than the name Unity Atom, and it is, realistically. But when you've built something which is, broadly speaking, a category killer, how you then build on from that is extremely difficult. So it's a really weird review. I make no, if you like, I apologize in advance, where I reached the conclusion that it's objectively excellent. It really is a sensationally good product. It builds on all of the things you were talking about, Phil, with the 778. It builds on all the things with the M10. I just don't know if it does enough under the normal system building circumstances to justify its existence over its absurdly talented little brother.
I'm assuming, Ed, that it uses the hybrid digital amplification.
Yeah. It's unbelievably powerful.
Yeah.
200 watts into 8 ohms, which is massively understated, looking at some of the online measurements that are doing the rounds. 300 and some high 300s into 4 ohms. There isn't a pair of loudspeakers under £10,000 it won't drive the bolts out of. I mean, it's Herculean in terms of what it can do. It's a magnificent product, Phil. It's just, unfortunately, it's a magnificent product which is trying to be better than an equally magnificent product.
Yeah, I mean, like I say, I absolutely love the 778, and I think some of the reason behind that was the digital amplification. I mean, I know it divides a lot of people, especially purists, who say no, you got to have proper class amplification and all the rest of it. To be honest with you, that little box, that little AV receiver, it looked the same as the image that I'm looking at on the M33 with the vents on the top of the chassis. It never got overly warm.
No.
And the power, it could shove out more power and cleaner power than the 2 power amps I'm using at the minute with the Leindorf.
No, absolutely. The NAD are what, 13, 14 years into commercially retailing their Class D amplifiers, and that experience shows. We've reached the point with a number of products now, and we have for some time, where I would, in this magnificent post-COVID world that we could be considering next year, some of the most vocal critics of the topology, I would have a whale of a time with a 4 or 5 amp group test, three Class D. Oh, I don't know. Let's do 2 Class A, 2 Class AB, and then do 6, and then 2 Class D. And if they can tell me which topology is which, with a very, very revealing pair of loudspeakers, I'll be genuinely impressed, because just the way that they behave, as you say, it's just effortless, clean, cool running power. There's never the slightest sense of strain. I mean, you could argue that compared to the name unities, which are class AB, they're nowhere near as powerful, but there's a sort of propulsive force that the NADs don't have. But class AB NAD doesn't really go in for that sort of propulsive heft. It's never been what the company is about. It's been about just clean, effortless, matter-of-fact go. And all the things that you like with the 778 and with the M10 are still here. That display is fantastic. Big, clear, easy to read. When you're not using it in streaming, you get 2 VU meters come up for the inputs, which is childish and pointless, but lovely. You've got connectivity for days, digital inputs, analog inputs, HDMI ARC, phono stage.
Blue OS, that really impressed me as well. It was the first time I'd actually used the operating system.
I will say, I do like Blue OS too. At the moment, Blue Sound / NAD are behind in getting their products Roon certified. So whereas when I tested the M10, it was Roon capable, it's now not, and neither is this. It's nice to have that as an additional option at £4,000 because it is a significant sum of money, and a number of people will be using Roon at that point. It is supposed to be sorted, but at the moment it is not. Right. So yes, okay. It's a hell of a product. I really don't want to have a downer on it because it's magnificent. Unfortunately, it lives in a family of magnificent products. It's a nice. I guess it's a nice problem for NAD to have. And I would also say, just because I don't take myself too seriously, I haven't done for some time. Whatever my criticisms of it, NAD is back ordered to the eyeballs on this. You cannot get an M33 just walking into a shop. It's all on order. So whatever my thoughts are, it is enormously popular.
Yeah.
And I think that's fair. I might have to just pop off. There's a lot of noise coming from upstairs. So hang on a second.
All right. So we're going to move over to software next anyway. So we'll see you in a sec. So while Ed's away doing whatever he's doing, we'll come back to the album of the week. So let's move on to film review. And Steve asked me to go and watch this film so we could discuss it. I didn't watch it.
Neither did I.
Oh, right. A new David Fincher film, and neither of you have bothered watching, even though all you had to do was turn on Netflix.
Well, you know what? I haven't seen Citizen Kane.
I've spent most of the day on Skype calls, so the time just disappeared today. So I was going to watch it this afternoon. That was my plan, was to sit down and watch it this afternoon, and I didn't. So
sorry, can I just go back a second? Kaz, you've watched all these Steven Seagal films, but you haven't seen Citizen Kane.
Is Steven Seagal in Citizen Kane? No.
It'd probably be a better film if he was.
I've never seen it either.
I've never seen it, so I think my problem is I do want to see this new film. I feel I'll better appreciate it if I watch Citizen Kane.
You do not have to have seen Citizen Kane.
No, I appreciate that, but I feel like it's a good reason to get out and watch it.
Yes. I think it's about time you did watch it. Well overdue.
Kumari even recommended it in the review, and it made me go, well, I better go and watch Citizen Kane.
I actually watched Citizen Kane and then I watched Mank. But I have seen Citizen Kane before, but I haven't seen it in quite a while. So I thought, I'll give it a rewatch.
Is it good?
It's reasonably good, but it's very showy. It's like, it was Orson Welles' first film. He had all the toys to play with, so lots of deep field, lots of deep focus, sets on roofs on sets, so lots of low camera angles.
First film ever to use a crane, wasn't it?
I don't know if it was the first film, but he definitely bunged in every little trick.
I'm sure it was the first film to introduce one of the crane shots. There's one amazing bit that's maybe laugh out loud because it's so relevant today. But at one point, Kane runs for office and then runs for governor, and he owns a newspaper as well. Essentially, it's William Randolph Hearst, but he runs for office, and then he's got a mistress in it, and his opponent basically says, if you don't pull out of the race, I'll out you, and he won't pull out. So he tells he outs him as having a mistress, but Kane thinks the American people will still vote for him, but they don't, and he loses. But there's a scene where they're in the
in the office of the newspaper editorial room, and they've got two different headlines, and one is Kane wins, and the other one is polls rigged. I just thought, oh, that sounds quite familiar. Anyway, Mank is about the writing of Citizen Kane. So it's about Herman Mankiewicz, who wrote Citizen Kane, co-wrote technically with Orson Welles, although the general opinion now is that Mankiewicz wrote it and Orson Welles just claimed credit. In fact, originally under the deal, in terms of their deal, Orson Welles is going to claim sole credit, but Mankiewicz held out and he said, I'm not doing that because it's my best work in years. Anyway, he wrote it. He was a friend of William Randolph Hearst and a friend of Marion Davis, who partially inspire characters in the film Citizen Kane. And it's about his relationship with them and him writing it, and about him as a character and his relationship with his brothers, because it's also like Joseph Mankiewicz was his younger brother, who went on to direct things like Cleopatra. It's written by Fincher's father, Jack Fincher. It was written, he's I think dead now, but he wrote it. He was going to make it originally after the game, but he couldn't get a studio to commit to filming in black and white. Obviously, these things have changed, and now Netflix has said you can do whatever you like. So he shot it at 8K. He finished it at 6K. We shot it in black and white. Actually, in black and white. It's not been decolorized. It hasn't had the color saturation taken out of it. It was shot in black and white. There was only a black and white version of this film. He also played around with the image, so it's an HDR, but he just softened it deliberately to make it look more like it was actually shot in 1940. He adds fake cigarette burns for fake real changes. The sound is 5.1, but it's very compressed deliberately to make it sound like a studio mix from 1940. So apart from the aspect ratio, which is 2.2 to 1, and if you'd done it at 4 to 3, 1.33 to 1, it would have been like they discovered this, lost film from 1940. Gary Oldman's fantastic in it. The whole cast are really strong, actually. I thought it was a really good. There's some great lines in it. It's an interesting story.
Is he going to get an Oscar?
Well, let's be honest. Given how few films have come out, he hasn't got a lot of competition, has he? Is it going to be that or Bad Boys for Life?
Oh, Bad Boys for Life, obviously.
Yeah, that'd be my vote too. Anyway, it's definitely worth watching.
I love the way that you've automatically removed Tenet from the list, just by.
Tenet was never on the list. The Emperor has no new clothes. Come on.
Seemingly, the audio mix on the disc is intelligible
and unbelievably loud, apparently.
Yes.
And only 5.1. It's like, come on, mate. Atmos mix.
Well, you say that, but Dunkirk is one of the best sounding 5.1 mix ever. So
really, no one cares as long as it's got subtitles.
but the subtitle will come up unintelligible.
Yeah.
The old rap
deliberately unintelligible.
Well, they did that with Lost in Translation, didn't they? Because that was the first thing you went back. What's he saying to her? And you try and bring up the subtitles to see if it would sit in. It just says unintelligible.
There's a scene in Fire Walk with Me, isn't there, where they're in a nightclub and there's really loud music playing. And originally David Lynch did it where you couldn't hear what anyone was saying because of the music. But the studio said, can you please put some subtitles in so people know what's going on?
It's funny because I watched, and you did too, I watched Mad Max. I watched the Australian mix.
Yeah, of course.
The original the 2-channel.
With a full-on Strine accent for Mel.
It's there are some scenes where the music overpowers the dialogue. I mean, I read about the remix, and the remix was done partly not just to. They seem to suggest,
you mean the American version?
Yeah, so they seem to suggest it wasn't done to Americanize it. It was done because you couldn't hear all the dialogue, and the Australian cast weren't available for the ADR. So they just did an American cast, is what they suggest in it. People just assume it was for a different audience, but it's because scenes like the hospital scene, where the doctors are talking quite openly about what to do with someone who isn't yet dead, you can't hear it in the Australian because the music's just too overpowering. But yeah, I found that. I mean, talking about overpowering music, I did find that. I did find that an interesting mix. It was clearly better hearing the original voices, though.
Oh damn yeah! I mean, the overdubbed version is a really weird historical document.
I don't think I'd ever heard the original track.
I've only ever watched it with the original, or
I had a DVD from Donkeys years ago that had both, and it was interesting. It was just fascinating, compare and contrast. And I mean, also the overdub one was in glorious mono as well, for a very, very focused sound experience. But
anyway, I give Mank 2 thumbs up in honor of Tom, and since all you have to do is sit on your sofa and turn on Netflix, you've really got no excuse for not watching it. You, Kaz, given you've watched every piece of crap that's been on Netflix all year.
I'll fish out Citizen Kane and I'll watch it over Christmas because it's. Do
you have to watch Citizen Kane?
No, you do not have to watch Citizen Kane to enjoy this film.
I'm using it as an excuse to fill that gap.
I've never.
Are you going to play on a sled as well?
Yeah, I think so. I think I'm going to shoot the next podcast on a crane. So, have you seen Raised by Wolves?
No, I watched episode 1. I don't want to sound like someone in a feedback thread, but I can't believe you gave that a 10. I watched episode 1. Does it get better? Because I've got to say, it wasn't grabbing me up. It didn't
grab you with that escalated quick at the end of episode 1.
Well, no, it did. But then again, I just think, is it now compulsory for every science fiction show to be led by a female space Jesus? Because that appears to be the case now. Basically, if you look at Star Wars sequels, a perfect, can do anything she likes, female space Jesus. You look at Discovery, Discovery, anything can do everything, perfect female space Jesus. And now we've got a robotic female space Jesus who also flies.
I'm not sure I'd akin her to Jesus. She's a little bit darker than that.
No, a little bit dark. But you know what I mean?
She's a space Jesus.
Old Testament.
Yeah, a bit more Old Testament. But I will persevere, but I can't say that I thought it didn't look as expensive. It looked a bit cheap.
I think it's hard. I mean, yeah, I think it was my favorite sci-fi of the year. Favorite sci-fi of the year, yes. And if you come across
better than Lovecraft Country.
I think, to be honest with you, Steve, I think Kaz just scores these things nowadays just to see
wind people up,
just to see how far he can push it. I think.
Does it have the right effect? I mean, I think that I agree with that we need a score, but sometimes people do skip to the number.
I mean, this is a conversation we're definitely going to have at some point. But yeah, it's getting a bit silly with scores and stuff nowadays, and it's detracting from the actual content, which is a shame. So we need to have a look at that. But I've downloaded all 10 episodes onto my Sky Q box, and they're only HD as well. So I take it this wasn't done in 4K, because normally HBO.
I'd be surprised if it wasn't.
Well, I don't know. HBO Max currently isn't in 4K. I think
exactly.
Wonder Woman 1984 will be the first 4K Atmos.
Okay. But it'd be interesting if after that, a lot of their existing titles get upgrades.
Well, I mean, certainly, I just bought Chernobyl on 4K. Yeah. So that is available now. Is available as a 4K
I'm sure that the third episode of that in 4K is an unmitigated delight. God. It was grim enough on Now TV.
I've got it on my Sky Q box in 4K. I haven't got around to it. This is one for over Christmas just to chew me up. See?
Yeah, don't eat in front of the third one.
Chernobyl will be a fitting end to a crap year. Although it's
magnificent.
Some of the best TV I've ever seen. So,
but not. You may be devastated to learn it's not a laugh a minute. So
no, my plan is 18th. That's it. I'll do my editor role in the morning, and in the evening publishing stuff. But as far as work goes, I ain't testing anything, not reviewing anything. I'm just going to try and get through the pile of stuff that I need to get through, whether that's in the cinema room or on the TV. I'm just going to try and plow through what I've missed this year and catch up.
Well, I've managed to get my beer fridge,
isn't it?
my beer fridge is in and running now, so I can stay appropriately plastered without affecting the refrigeration of my dairy and meat. So I'm pleased. So.
Only you would think it that way, Ed.
No. I have no desire to get food poisoning. I mean, not least because the idea of getting food poisoning, having to seek medical attention, and getting COVID as a result of that. I mean, in terms of ways not to go, that's well up there. So
managed all year up to that point.
Yeah, my proper fridge is for food. I now have a means of keeping my alcoholic beverages suitably chilled without interfering with that. So I'm happy.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a subject we've come back to numerous times this year because of the pandemic and everything else that's going on, and that is what the studio is going to do with the films that they have sitting, waiting to go. No cinemas open at the minute for films to go, and then we had the HBO Max, which is why Steve's trying to get HBO Max at the minute, making their announcements that they, I think that. Correct me if I'm wrong, but they had one deal with Warner to do a simultaneous day and date release online as well as a cinema, didn't they? And then
for Wonder Woman 1984 is going to be released at cinemas. This is in the US, by the way. We're talking just about the US here, but in the US, at cinemas on Christmas Day and on HBO Max on Christmas Day to stream for, I believe, 5 weeks. And then there's going to be a period of cinema exclusivity, which seems a bit pointless because everyone will have watched it by then. And then I guess it will go on to VOD and discs, etc. Then, out of the blue, I mean, and a friend of mine said to me, this is basically the cinematic equivalent of when Warner's announced they were going Blu-ray exclusive at CES in 2008. Was it 2009? CES 2009. And basically killed HD DVD dead. And he said, I think for cinemas, they just announced game over.
Seemingly, a lot of the executives in the studio and a lot of the companies that have ploughed up to 75% of the funding for a lot of
Legendary, who made Kong versus Godzilla and Dune,
knew nothing about it. It was dropped on
it was dropped on everyone. No one, the cinemas didn't know anything about it. None of the production companies, the talent that made the films, nothing. And I suspect that was because of two reasons. One, for secrecy. If they told one person it was going to get out. Two, this is nothing to do with Warner's. This is to do with their owners, AT&T. AT&T want to push HBO Max. They looked at next year, thought it's a pretty tight, the packed schedule of films that are supposed to be coming out. Cinemas might not be open again properly till maybe the summer. We want to really get our subscriber numbers up because obviously jealous of the numbers that Disney's been getting on Disney Plus. I think it's up to 75 million now. So they said, no, let's just shove it all onto HBO Max and you think about it, if they just pull in, I don't know, 10 million subscribers off the back of it for a year, paying $15 or $20 a month.
Yeah,
that's a lot of money. That's more than they're going to make it in the cinema with these films. And to be honest, looking at the list of films, with the exception of Suicide Squad, Dune, and The Matrix, they aren't that good anyway.
Yeah, it's not exactly a insane list, and some of the better titles aren't.
It pains me to say it, but Dune could probably do better this way anyway.
But then I've read a few articles through the week in Variety and so on, and one of the things that you don't think about is obviously the contracts that are in place for the actors and
back-end deals and that kind of stuff.
Back-end deals and all the rest of it. So, if it makes X amount in the cinema, then that opens up a percentage on the takings for certain people on the crew, whether it be actors or directors and assistant directors or whatever, and that's where they make a lot of their salary for these things is made on the back of that. If these films are not going to the cinema or very
well, they are going to the cinema,
but they're not going to hit the figures that's in the contracts, are they? Really?
Yeah. To play devil's advocate, I can see why they do this, because who knows when everything is going to be okay for cinemas to open up.
I'm not again with that, but there's obviously deals in place when these films were made.
Yes.
And the studios can't just wipe their hands of that and say, well, you're not getting your percentage.
Yeah, I mean, the studios will probably just say force majeure, pandemic. That's why we're doing it, which is what Warners have said. This is just for 2021 because of the pandemic, but I'll bet you $10 to a box of donuts that if it works out well for them in 2021, we might see something similar going along. I mean, Universal have already been trying to do this anyway, and they've had a row with AMC about it because of Trolls World Tour. But this is just accelerating what was inevitable. The fact is, this is the future, and we're just accelerating towards it now.
Well, I mean, just look at what Disney are doing. Everything that Disney are doing. I mean, you will not see any physical media, I bet, by the end of the year from Disney. Everything will be pushed to streaming. Everything will be pushed to Disney Plus.
Depending on how things go, I'll bet you we end up getting Black Widow on Disney Plus without any miss a cinema release.
Yeah, I can see that as well. I mean, I appreciate that people are going to be losing money on this, but you've got to wonder how long people can wait to recoup money. Let's say a film takes maybe 2 years to make, from pre-production all the way through to finishing, editing, post-production, and then planning the release and marketing. And then you add a year of COVID on top, and then potentially another year until cinemas are back on their feet. I mean, are they going to wait 4 years to start seeing some bank? I mean, I can kind of...
They fit the mechanics. The mechanics of how the industry is funded cannot do that.
Yeah, so
I mean, when going back to what you were saying about secrecy earlier on, the other thing we have no idea about is just what's left in the kitty at Warner Brothers to hold out for any longer. You know, obviously driving up numbers for HBO Max is important, but has this been forced by the fact that they are beginning to be out of money?
Well, it's either very, very clever on their part, or it's a panic stations and they're panicking and needing to raise capital as quickly as they can. So it's either one or the other.
No, it's not capital. They want to get the subscribers onto HBO Max. That's what they want. That's their ultimate. I mean, and when I say Warner's, it's not Warner's. It's AT&T. AT&T want subscribers on HBO Max, and this is how they think they can do it. Warner's and all the studios, as you just pointed out, Ed, are sitting on a lot of films, very expensive films, and they need and they can't release them. So you're getting a logjam next year. Plus, you know, you're paying, like, for example, Eon Productions, who made the Bond movie. I mean, they financed that themselves, I think. So they've used bank loans. So they're paying a lot of interest on a film that they can't release, which is probably why they were sniffing around Apple and Netflix to try and flog it. So, you know, you've got to look at how long is it going to take to get into the cinema? Is it going to make any money in the cinema? Because you could sit here and say, okay, cinemas are open again by the summer. That doesn't mean say anyone's going to go back to the cinema. People's attitudes have changed. If you talk to any TV manufacturer, I've talked to a few recently, I asked them the same question, how's this year been? And they all say the same thing. Best year we've ever had. We have flogged so many TVs, big screen TVs have been flying out, Samsung, flying out the door because people have been stuck at home and they've thought, you know what? I'm going to get in a big telly and a decent sound system. And once they've made that step to what we've all been embracing for years, which is home cinema, and they realize they can watch films, you know, in their home cinema, in the comfort of their home, without having to traipse down to the cinema, go out in the rain, sort out a babysitter, the cost is less, it's more comfortable, and you haven't got to deal with someone on their phone or blowing their nose or munching popcorn next to you. Once you've made that switch, you don't go back. So I think we are, you know, at a tipping point as far as the consumer's, you know, relationship with the cinema is concerned.
I love to think I was ahead of the power curve.
Obviously, in the industry that we're in and the positions that we have, I love home cinema, but I also love cinema, and I would hate to see cinema die on the back of this. There's nothing like going to a big proper screen and seeing a blockbuster on the big screen. Nothing compares to your home cinema. It's never going to get anywhere close to that because you just don't have the space to create that anyway. So I really don't want to see the end of cinema.
I'd agree with that. It would be nice if they kept it in some shape or form.
I think what you're going to see, I can't take credit for this. I was talking to
people going buying records. Yeah.
No. I was talking to one of my sons, the father of one of my son's best friends, whilst they had a quick spell at the park, and I think he's absolutely right. You're going to see this weird diverging of the cinema thing to true event cinema, where you pay significant sums of money for IMAX style
Tenet,
done everything. You know, turned up to 11, and then art cinema will continue alongside that. You know, with smaller, more interesting venues where you're looking at potentially an absolute holocaust is the middle ground between those 2 points.
I think what we'd like to see is that with the move towards streaming and less revenues available at the cinema, that the big budget movie's gone. That the studios are going to start making, you know, and maybe that's a good thing, you know, less money thrown at the screen and more creativity.
our prophecy that we've been declaring since 2008
is finally
going to happen.
No, I tell you
some
what.
external factors.
Avengers Endgame will be seen as a high watermark and the end of an era.
Yeah,
no, I agree with
the end
that.
of the big box office, big budget movie cycle. It ended with Endgame. I mean, there's been a few since, and obviously, but that will be seen as the high watermark, the point at which everything changed.
Yes, and I don't think you necessarily need to do it the same way anymore. I mean, Avengers Endgame was a big one, but you don't need to throw $500 million at a movie and then spend another $500 million on marketing. I mean, it gets ludicrous. You can make some really good movies for $100 million, and without the marketing,
Never mind $100 million. The Invisible Man was one of the best films I've seen this year, and that cost $7 million.
Yes, okay. I know. And
they made $120 million just before the pandemic kicked off.
We both watched Mad Max. I mean, people can work wonders.
$400,000.
Yeah, exactly.
Dollars.
Edited in someone's kitchen. Yes, I mean they can work wonders. So I'd like to see that too. But you can make decent blockbusters, but you don't have to spend $500 million. I know James Cameron's would say otherwise.
He's spending $500 million on 2 Avatar movies. I think they could be an interesting test case for whether there's a future of a big budget film.
Yeah, I mean, he's gambled a lot there.
Hopefully, the outcome of this, and we'll be talking about it next Christmas, is that there's a more balance to the market, where you have your options. You can go to the cinema. You've got your streaming services. And everybody's happy. Hopefully there's a happy medium to be found there where, we're going to see cinemas close. There's no doubt about that. That's going to happen. And things are going to change. But hopefully it gets to the stage where if you want to stay at home, you can stay at home. But also, if you want to go to the cinema, see it on a big screen, then the opportunity is there for you to do that. Because I'd hate to lose that, because I used to love my midweek drive over to the Metro Centre and go and see a film.
Well, I think the Metro Centre is possibly in a sufficiently large head of population that it has a degree of survivability. And I suspect that one of the 2 Milton Keynes cinemas would probably ride it out as well. But let's not pretend that if this is the trend, it's not going to lead to a bit of a die-off.
I mean, I think that looking at the list that they published, there's only 3 that I would go, I definitely want to see those at the cinema. And I think that they're leveraging a big, huge list of 20 films to try and get people on HBO Max. But look, Mortal Kombat, Little Things, Tom and Jerry,
most of those films
Saints
are not.
Newark. Yeah, they're things that I would be surprised if they didn't turn up on streaming. Conjuring.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's not a great slate of films, in all fairness. No. I mean, the only film on that list I really would like to see on a big IMAX screen is Dune.
Yeah, maybe Matrix 4.
After the last 2, no, I'm not.
After the last 2, no, I'm not interested in that. Same goes for Godzilla vs. King Kong. I mean, that's been pushed back twice already anyway, because Godzilla, King of the Monsters, didn't do particularly well. Suicide Squad, I'm interested in because it's James Gunn. So those Suicide Squad and Dune are the 2 that I would be most interested in seeing.
I agree about Suicide Squad. I'm not sure it'd drag me to the cinema though. And I can see why they've.
Well, right now, nothing's going to drag me to the cinema, which is annoying because outside of America, we are being forced to go to the cinema. Thanks a bunch, Warners. So I have to risk my life if I want to see Wonder. Not that I really want to see Wonder Woman, but if I wanted to see Wonder Woman 1984, I've got to actually risk my life to do it. If I can find a cinema that's actually open, that is. So
I don't think I'm.
We haven't even got an alternative.
Going to the cinema on Christmas Day to see Wonder Woman, or whenever it is, it's the 17th, isn't it?
It's a week earlier.
Yeah. So, like we've been saying most of the year, it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. It's certainly.
I should take a drink in celebration of that.
Yeah, I had to get that phrase in there. Otherwise, people would be incredibly disappointed. But it's going to be interesting to see how it does play out. It really is, because it's not going to go back to how it used to be. There's no way it can do that. So let's see how it plays out. I don't
know about anybody else, but I'm just really happy with my once a week Mandalorian fix.
Well, I was coming on to Mandalorian. We can't do a podcast without Mandalorian these days.
So
I have never been as hyped after watching 30 minutes of TV as I was.
I can't believe it was only 30 minutes. I thought it was longer than that.
Yeah,
so much crammed into that.
So much happens.
I mean, obviously we're not going to spoil it, so no spoilers or whatever. But if there was. If you were given a bit of paper and said, what would you like to see in this episode? It was almost like every dream come true. The sound when that craft appeared,
certain spaceship,
it was like cream your pants moment. It really was. It was, it's fantastic. It really is. And no, it's not fantastic acting. It's not the best thing on science. It's Star Wars, and it's Star Wars that I love, not the prequels.
It's
not
fan
the
service done right, rather than
absolutely.
Like, it's not like Rise of Skywalker fan service, which just felt shoehorned in a desperate attempt to try and make a film.
Well, it's made by Star Wars fans that actually understand the universe and canon and everything else, and they've been responsible for some of the best Star Wars content in the last 20 years with the animated stuff like Rebels and Clone Wars. So, it's perfect in terms of the Star Wars universe and that time frame. And if you'd said to me what was going to happen on Friday, and the Friday before that as well, it was exceptionally good TV, exceptionally good Star Wars TV. And I hope it continues. I really do. I hope it doesn't suddenly disappear up its own arse like a lot of the sequels and stuff have.
I don't think it will. I think it's got great avenues to go down. I can see spin-off shows from this.
What was that tweet?
They do it right.
That tweet
they're already seeding a load of.
Yeah, I think they could really make it work. I mean,
so
as you
stuff.
say, it's fan service done right, and it's not fan service by committee, which I think is what ruined some of the other movies. They sat in a room and they went, what would people like to see? We don't.
You can use Rogue One as a good example. They've got fan service that's really stupid, like when they bump into the two blokes that were in the cantina later in Star Wars on Jeddah. That felt like shoehorned in fan service. But then later on, you've got Rogue, the Red Leader and Gold Leader. Well, of course they would be there because that makes sense. So that's a really nice bit of fan service. That makes complete sense within the story.
Red 5 needing replacing as well.
But did anyone see that tweet doing the rounds? The great summary of the Mandalorian. It's a man with a chronic inability to stop making best friends. I just thought was in some way very charming. I mean, I thoroughly enjoyed it too.
Anybody else get an email from Sony Pictures asking them to be in Spider-Man 3? Because I think everyone appears to be getting cast in that at the moment. They're bringing back every actor from every Spider-Man.
Well, they're going to do the multiverse.
Big time, big time.
Which, if it's anything approaching what the animated film was like, it should be superb. Because
it could be great.
The animated film was absolute, and I'm not a comic book guy. I'm not a Spider-Man guy. I thoroughly enjoyed that. I thought it was excellent.
I am very glad you are not comic book guy.
I got my first taste of the PS5.
Worst podcast ever.
Well, that's an evergreen statement, frankly. But,
I'm always a little bit wary of when studios go, hey, look, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse did really, really well. Let's make a live action movie with the Spider-Verse. But
hadn't they kind of seeded it a little bit in the previous Spider-Man film when they talked about? I know he wasn't actually from a multiverse, but
no, I know. I mean, I love the idea, and I hope they get it right. I just I don't know whether I love it when
I think the multiverse is going to be a major part of what are we into now? Stage 4, whatever it is, Phase 4. Phase 4. Yeah. I think that's going to be. It's all about the multiverse, and the multiverse is how they're going to bring mutants into it for Phase 5.
Yeah,
that's my guess.
Well,
anyway, WandaVision is in January, so
yes,
good reason to keep Disney Plus for a bit longer.
Yeah, well, it's not due till March, isn't it? It was March.
No, January.
January, yeah.
Well, I mean, what's new? Do you my
No, I'm saying
no,
it's not due till March.
It's not till March, and that's why I'm thinking come March time, they've shown WandaVision. They need something to keep people. So they got Black Widow.
Oh yeah, Black Widow. Yes.
Yeah, but your subscription is going to go up from $5.99 to
yeah, I don't mind. It actually is worth the money, to be honest. It's good value.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think I'm paying. Is it $11.99 for Netflix if I have 4K HDR?
No, never mind that. And $9.99 for Now TV is.
Oh God,
that's going to get dumped
for Now TV.
Yeah, Now TV is ridiculous. And if you want
720p,
if you want 1080p, you got to pay extra.
And I pay for the movies as well, actually, at the moment when I think about it. But obviously, Steve, you got your money's worth out of Disney Plus. You watched Return to Oz the other. I mean, I noticed it was.
I watched it ages ago when I realised it was on there, and it was as grim as I remember it being.
I haven't watched it since I was a kid, and I don't know whether it's.
There's a lot of old classics knocking around on Disney Plus, like The Black Hole. That was another film I watched. I saw it at the cinema and I watched it and I thought, oh my God, those. I mean, who thought, let's make a kids film? And you know who we're going to have in the film? Ernest Borgnine. Kids will love him. Anthony Perkins. Yeah, that would be great. Maximilian Schell. Yeah, that should work out fine. Let's have 2 robots voiced by Rodney McDowell and Slim Pickens. That cast had an average age of about 86.
Well, yeah, you know. And I noticed that Willow in the original, I watched the original Tron the other night, actually.
Willow has not aged well.
No. Whereas in some regards,
it was crap when it came out.
Yeah, no, it was no good when it came out.
some parts of Tron are, I mean, just absurdly ambitious in the scope of what could
I admire
be done.
Tron for its ambition, even though a lot of the stuff is not CG, it's actually cell animation.
No, I know, but nevertheless, just some of the concepts they were trying to get across.
It's just a bit boring.
Yeah, well, maybe. Yeah. I enjoyed it.
Are the Ewoks films on Disney Plus? I haven't looked, but
no, I've got those on. No, they're not. They don't exist anymor. I've got them on DVD. I've got them on DVD.
What was it? Caravan of
Courage and Battle for Endor. And they're as bad as you think they are.
Oh no, they are, but as bad.
I have seen Caravan of Courage, and it was bloody awful.
Yeah,
I mean, it's really bad.
That's just what we wanted. After the Return of the Jedi was more Ewoks.
Yes.
No, yeah, they really were. They didn't have their finger on the pulse, did they, on that one?
Yeah. The Ewok Adventure, 1980.
No, you still.
Oh no, that's Caravan of Courage.
Yes. There's also an Ewok animated series I've also got on DVD, and also the Droids animated series on there.
I do remember the Ewok animated that was Saturday morning television when I was a young'un.
Yes, I've got no excuse. I was an adult when I bought it. In my defense, I've never actually watched it. I've had the disc 20 years.
But I'll tell you what's been a masterstroke though for Disney Plus is not just the Mandalorian, but the fact now that people are going to go and watch Rebels and the Clone Wars that have never seen them before, and are now going to go and watch it.
Can I be honest? There's a subset of people, and I include me in this. I'll probably keep paying simply so I can remember a Simpsons episode at 3:00 in the afternoon and watch it over dinner.
Have you watched the new season that's on there now?
No. All the new ones are dreadful. But it's suddenly remembering, dental plan and thousands of other, essentially, just inbuilt catchphrases and going, I'm going to watch that this evening. I watched the episode where he with the lobster the other night.
What was it? What was the episode where he gave Grace when you went rub-a-dub-dub, thanks for the grub?
I'll have to find that for you. I can't remember. I know which one you're talking about, and I can't remember where that crops up.
Has anyone been watching Family Guy? Because that's back on Now TV.
I know, I forgot about that.
There's a great episode where they have a focus group. So they have the Family Guy, family watching a focus group, watching Disney mandated reboots of Family Guy. It's actually really clever. They had like one where it's Lois centric and it's all female empowerment, and they really have a good old go at Disney, who now own them, of course, because they're made by Fox.
What could possibly go wrong?
And,
they've been uncancelled yet again.
They actually make jokes about being cancelled in the episode about the rebooting. The one I watched last night's episode, which with Stewie and Brian, where Quagmire opens a cat cafe. Honestly, there was 3 or 4 times when I laughed out loud. Which is, I think when you laugh out loud at something, they've really nailed it, and there were some really laugh.
What's happened with the Orville?
That's restarted filming.
Has it? Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
So,
you may not have heard about this, Phil, but there's been this pandemic thing that's really screwed up the schedules.
I actually genuinely thought that the next season
it hasn't been cancelled. It hasn't been cancelled, but they hadn't shot it yet.
All right. Okay. I'd assumed that it had been shot. Sorry. So.
I love the way that
I don't know where
Stuart is desperately trying to keep up with just how randomly this conversation is going.
Where does Seth MacFarlane find the time to do all this stuff?
He's got the Christmas #1 at the moment as well. So in the US, he's done a duet with someone. He has got a good voice.
He's a really good singer.
Not actually as good as Hayley.
Ridiculously talented.
Not as good as Hayley MacFarlane, his sister. Who did the daughter in American Dad, but she really has got an unbelievably good singing voice. So,
Stuart's just reminded me that The Expanse is back in a week, is it? 2 weeks? I'm looking forward to that.
It's just
You
living
can-
the dream, isn't it?
Yes, I'm very, very much looking
Sorry,
forward to that.
Kaz, you didn't actually review Mad Max. What do you think of the disc?
I thought it looked fantastic, and I'm shocked by how good they can make a film shot.
Given it's a low-budget exploitation flick made in
looks,
Australia in 1979, it looks pretty amazing.
You know, I watched Blade, and I thought Blade looked tremendous, but you know, if I'm going to
those effects don't hold up well, though, do they?
The effects don't hold up, and there were a few scenes where they've clearly worked really well to clean it up and do it without losing detail. But there are a couple of scenes where it looks a tiny bit edgy, tiny bit soft. I watched Mad Max, and I just thought it looked gorgeously.
Fundamentally, the unbelievably deranged method of just shooting everything for real. It does. It does
put up. Yeah.
There's an amazing documentary because Warner Brothers, because of the pandemic, has been releasing loads of really interesting documentaries on YouTube. You go to the Warner Brothers channel. There's some great ones, and there's a whole hour-and-a-half documentary about the making of Mad Max Fury Road, and you realize they did most of it for real.
Yeah, they did.
George Miller was saying, he said it was the most stressful thing he's ever done in his life. For 60 days of the shoot, he was terrified every day someone was going to get killed.
No,
that's really stressful.
There's that 8-minute sequence that does the rounds every now and again because someone pops it back up on social media and everyone goes. Rrr. There's an 8-minute sequence of Fury Road where all of the CGI is removed. It's just Fury Road, a friend of mine, a guy I went to school with, was one of the people who built 2 of the vehicles, helped build 2 of the vehicles for Fury Road, one of which is the enormous Cadillac tractor thing.
Monster truck.
Yeah, and it's like, it had 2 decorative engines. Well, how much does it cost to actually make them both work? I don't know, about $9,000. All right, we'll do it. So then all of a sudden it just grows from there, and
well, they spent 15 years making it because originally they had all the cars made, and they were going to shoot it in Australia
with Mel Gibson,
I think. No, not with. Was that with Mel?
was,
Yeah, it was with Mel. Yeah,
right,
and then it poured with rain. They had the worst weather. They hadn't rained in this desert for like 50 years, and it poured down, and they had to cancel it, and then they ended up shooting it in Namibia. And to rebuild all the cars again because they destroyed them all because they didn't want someone else using them. Unbelievable! It's a great documentary though, so I'd recommend it.
But going all the way back to the original, tortuously bringing this back, the simplicity of what they and what's more, there's stuff on camera which just doesn't work. Can we do spoilers in a 43-year-old film? Yeah, I mean the sequence, the Knight Rider. When he reaches the roadblock at the start of the film, the car is not supposed to skid round the outside of the roadblock, but they lit up this ancient rocket that they'd purchased for scrap and strapped it to the back of the car, and it didn't fire correctly. So instead of firing the car into the roadblock, it fires it round.
It did, yeah. It looks fantastic,
and it looks magnificent.
It does.
No one got killed on those.
No,
and someone did die, but it wasn't during the filming of Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome. It was the producer, wasn't it? He died in a helicopter crash scouting locations for that.
Yeah,
but yeah.
I think it looks tremendous in 4K. I'm shocked by how little it cost. I think they've done a great job. I think they've done some tinkering on the color timing. I remember it looking brighter than it does, but it suits the material. And I think it's a gorgeous 4K disc.
And
what I want them to release it in the UK because this is a US only disc.
I want the Road Warrior. That's what I want.
They will do that, but I want them to release it in the UK on an HMV exclusive steelbook with Japanese artwork just for Ed.
I don't know. Other than the fact I don't have a 4K Blu-ray player, it sounds
but
like
you'll like
idea.
the artwork. You'll frame the artwork.
Oh God, if they had the same artwork as actually no, if I had the same artwork that I'm going to spend a fortune on, I'll probably just forego it. But but no, it's
also tell you what I really like is the fact they remade Mad Max with swords and sandals. It's called Gladiator, and he's even called Max in it, and it's the same basic plot.
And on that bombshell, we're going to finish on time tonight. Oh, we're 3 minutes over. One day we'll hit
close.
One day we'll hit the mark. Podcast competition, Kaz.
Yeah, to win a copy of Train to Busan Presents Peninsula on Blu-ray, just use the following question to select the right answer on the competition page. Who directed Peninsula? I'm not going to tell you how many people got it wrong, but it's a lot. Yeah.
Do you wait till you've seen all the?
There's three Korean names in there. I mean, you're just not going to be able to guess it, guys. Just wait for the podcast. Really,
never.
It's 3 Korean names. I made it really hard. You've all got it wrong.
But if you really want to win a competition, become a patron.
Yeah.
And enter the competitions, because yours are fantastic. Right, well, that's it for this week. Like I say, next week is our final podcast of the year. We're going to be pretty movie-centric. We're going to be discussing the best of Christmas movies and all the rest of it. So a big section on Die Hard, obviously. But my thanks to Ed Selley.
Happy trails, Hans.
Kaz Harlow.
I'm just a fly in the ointment, just a monkey in the wrench.
And Steve Withers.
Now I know what a TV dinner feels like.
If you enjoyed the podcast, then please like and subscribe. Hitting the like button is important. So if you're still around and watching, please hit the like button before you disappear. It is appreciated. And of course, hit the notification bell and we'll tell you every time we upload new video content. Plus, we're also available on Twitter and Facebook. You can bookmark avforums.com for latest reviews, news, and video. And why not leave us a 5-star rating on any of the podcast providers that you use? If they allow you to rate the podcast, then please leave a 5-star rating, but only if you've enjoyed the show. I'm Phil Hinton. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you again next week.